The acceptance letter from Harvard trembled in my hands as I stood frozen in the hallway, watching my sister Emma parade around the living room in the crimson sweatshirt that should have been mine. The scholarship notification, my full ride to Harvard, was supposed to arrive today. Instead, I was holding a rejection letter that made no sense. Congratulations, sweetheart! My mother's voice dripped with pride as she embraced Emma. Harvard Law. We always knew you were destined for greatness. My father beamed from his leather armchair, already calculating the prestige this would bring to his law firm. The youngest Martinez to attend Harvard. This calls for champagne. I stared at the letter again, my heart hammering. According to this, I had been rejected due to failure to submit required documentation by the deadline. But I had submitted everything, twice to be certain. Unless my eyes found Emma's, and for just a moment, I caught something there. A flicker of guilt before she quickly looked away, twirling in her new sweatshirt. That's when it hit me. The mail. Emma always collected it before I got home from my job at the tutoring center. She'd been doing it for months, claiming she was helping Mom organize bills. But she hadn't been organizing bills. She'd been intercepting my mail. In that moment, standing there with a fraudulent rejection letter while watching my family celebrate my sister's stolen achievement, I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Because this wasn't the first time they'd sabotaged me. And this time, I remembered everything. You see, this was my second life. I died in a car accident at 25 in my previous existence, crushed under the weight of student debt and a failed career because my family had destroyed every opportunity I'd ever had. But somehow, impossibly, I'd been given another chance. I'd woken up on my 16th birthday with all my memories intact, knowing exactly how this family operated and what they were capable of. In my first life, I'd never understood why opportunities kept slipping through my fingers. Scholarships I was sure I'd qualified for never materialized. College acceptance letters seemed to get lost in the mail. Job interviews I'd scheduled would mysteriously be canceled. I'd blamed bad luck, administrative errors, my own inadequacy. But now I knew the truth. It had been Emma all along, with my parents' full knowledge and support. The pattern had started early. Emma was 2 years younger, but had always been the golden child. Prettier, more charming, better at manipulating our parents' emotions. When we were children, it had been small things. My art projects disappearing before school exhibitions. My homework assignments getting accidentally thrown away. Birthday party invitations that never reached me. As we got older, the sabotage became more sophisticated. Emma had intercepted my PSAT scores and forged lower ones to show our parents, convincing them I wasn't college material. She'd hacked into my email to delete communications from scholarship organizations. She'd even gone so far as to call my high school guidance counselor, impersonating our mother, to withdraw my applications to competitive summer programs. My parents had been willing accomplices, funneling all their resources and attention toward Emma while treating me like an inconvenience. When I'd shown aptitude in mathematics and science, they dismissed it as a phase. When teachers called home about my potential, somehow those messages never reached me. When I'd tried to discuss college plans, my father would launch into lectures about being realistic and knowing your limitations. In my previous life, I'd internalized their message that I was the lesser daughter. I'd accepted scraps, a community college education paid for with loans, a string of dead-end jobs, a cramped apartment I could barely afford. I'd watched from the sidelines as Emma sailed through Harvard on the scholarship that should have been mine, then landed a prestigious position at a top law firm that our father's connections had secured. I'd died bitter and broken, my potential completely wasted, but not this time. This time, I had something Emma didn't know about. Complete knowledge of her playbook. I knew every trick, every manipulation, every dirty tactic she would employ. More importantly, I knew her weaknesses, her vanity, her need for constant validation, her assumption that I was too naive to fight back. I folded the fake rejection letter carefully and slipped it into my backpack. Let them think their plan had worked. Let them believe they'd successfully sabotaged me again. While they celebrated Emma's fraudulent acceptance, I would be executing a plan that would destroy them all. You see, in my previous life, I discovered something crucial in those final bitter years. Our family had a secret, a very wealthy, very estranged secret. My father's older brother, Uncle Richard, had built a tech empire in Silicon Valley. He'd made his first billion before 40 and had been systematically cut out of our family due to a decades-old dispute over my grandfather's will. My father, jealous and bitter about his brother's success, had forbidden any contact. Richard Martinez didn't even know Emma and I existed. In my first life, I'd only learned about Uncle Richard after my father's death, when I'd gone through old family documents out of morbid curiosity. By then, it had been too late to reach out. Richard had died the year before, his vast fortune going to charitable foundations. But in this timeline, Richard was still alive, still wealthy, still completely unaware that his brother had two daughters. And more importantly, Richard Martinez was known in Silicon Valley for his scholarship foundation dedicated to supporting brilliant young women in STEM fields, exactly my area of expertise. As I watched Emma prance around in her stolen Harvard sweatshirt, I was already formulating my counterattack. Phase 1 would be establishing contact with Uncle Richard. Phase 2 would be securing legitimate opportunities that Emma couldn't intercept. Phase 3 would be ensuring that when the truth came out, and it would come out, the consequences would be swift and devastating. I walked calmly to my room, closed the door, and opened my laptop. Time to resurrect my real applications and reach out to the uncle my father had tried so hard to erase from our family history. The scholarship notification from Harvard was probably sitting in Emma's room right now, along with who knows how many other opportunities she'd stolen from me over the years. But she'd made a critical error this time. She'd gotten greedy, and greed would be her downfall. I opened a new browser window and began typing. Richard Martinez Foundation contact information. It was time to reclaim my future. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the disappointed daughter perfectly. I moped around the house, spoke wistfully about community college, and even asked Emma for advice about my limited options. She ate up every moment of it, offering condescending suggestions about trade schools and gap years, while basking in my parents' continued praise for her Harvard acceptance. What they didn't know was that I was orchestrating the most comprehensive revenge plan of my two lifetimes. My first breakthrough came when I successfully contacted Uncle Richard's foundation. I'd crafted my initial email carefully, introducing myself as the daughter of his estranged brother Miguel, and explaining that I'd discovered his existence through online research about successful Latino entrepreneurs. I'd been honest about the family estrangement, but vague about the reasons, focusing instead on my academic achievements and passion for biomedical engineering. Richard's response had been immediate and warm. He was hungry for family connection and devastated to learn he'd missed 16 years of his niece's lives. He invited me to visit his Palo Alto office during spring break, ostensibly to discuss scholarship opportunities, but clearly motivated by genuine curiosity about his brother's family. The video call had been even better than I'd hoped. Richard was everything my father wasn't. Generous, intellectually curious, genuinely interested in fostering young talent. When I'd shown him my research project on novel drug delivery systems, recreated from memory from my previous life's college work, his eyes had lit up with the kind of recognition and respect I'd never seen from my own parents. "Your work is extraordinary, Sophia," he'd said, leaning forward in his chair. "This is graduate-level thinking. Have you applied to any research programs?" I'd played my role perfectly, explaining how my family's financial situation made elite colleges seem impossible, how I'd been focusing on more realistic options. I'd even managed to work in a few subtle hints about feeling overlooked at home, about always being compared unfavorably to my younger sister. By the end of the call, Richard had offered me something far more valuable than Emma's stolen Harvard acceptance: a full scholarship to Stanford, where he served on the board of trustees, plus a guaranteed internship at his biotech subsidiary, plus a living stipend that would make me financially independent. But the real masterpiece had been his next suggestion. "Sophia, I know things have been complicated between your father and me," he'd said carefully, "but family is family. I'd love to meet Emma as well, and perhaps we can discuss opportunities for both of you girls. Would you be comfortable arranging a family meeting?" I'd pretended to consider it, biting my lip as if uncertain. I think my parents would really appreciate that, Uncle Richard. Emma's always been the academic star of the family. I'm sure they'd love for you to meet her." The hook was set. While I'd been building a relationship with Uncle Richard, I'd also been busy documenting Emma's crimes. My foreknowledge from my previous life had given me a huge advantage. I knew exactly where she kept her insurance files, the digital copies of everything she'd stolen from me over the years. Emma was methodical in her sabotage, keeping detailed records in a password protected folder on her laptop. She'd screenshotted my emails before deleting them, kept copies of intercepted mail, even maintained a spreadsheet tracking my applications and her interventions. She'd told herself it was just being thorough, but really it was evidence of her crimes. Getting access to her laptop had been laughably easy. Emma had always been careless with security, and she certainly didn't expect her harmless older sister to be capable of sophisticated hacking. A simple keylogger installed during one of her study sessions had given me her passwords within a week. What I'd found in her files had been even worse than I'd remembered from my previous life. The Harvard scholarship theft was just the tip of the iceberg. Over the past 2 years, Emma had intercepted acceptances to 7 different summer programs, 4 scholarship notifications, and countless opportunities for academic competitions and research projects. She'd even hacked my College Board account to lower my reported SAT scores. But Emma had been sloppy in other ways, too. She'd used our home computer for some of her email spoofing, and she'd been logged into her personal accounts while doing it. This created a digital paper trail that would be very difficult to explain away. I'd quietly copied everything, building a comprehensive dossier of her fraud, while continuing to play the role of her naive victim. Every forged email, every intercepted letter, every hacked account, I had evidence of all of it. The family meeting with Uncle Richard was scheduled for the Saturday before spring break. I'd convinced my parents that this was their chance to finally introduce Emma to someone who could really advance her career. They'd spent the week coaching her on what to say, how to present herself, completely obvious to the trap they were walking into. I'd also made some other strategic arrangements. First, I'd contacted Harvard's admissions office from my personal email account, explaining that I'd never received their scholarship notification and asking for clarification on my application status. Their response had been immediate and alarming. According to their records, I'd been awarded a full scholarship and they'd been waiting for my acceptance for weeks. They'd sent multiple notifications to my home address and were concerned about my lack of response. I'd asked them to resend all documentation to my private P.O. box, the one Emma didn't know about, and to include a complete record of their communication attempts. The packet that arrived had been damning. Copies of 3 separate letters sent to my home address, including the scholarship award notification, none of which I'd ever seen. I'd also reached out to the 6 other scholarship organizations that Emma had sabotaged in my previous life. Using the same email addresses and documentation from my files, I'd resubmitted applications and inquiries. The responses had been universally positive. Apparently, my academic record was even more impressive than I'd remembered, and several organizations had been genuinely puzzled by my failure to respond to their previous outreach. By the time Saturday morning arrived, I had assembled a case against Emma that would have made a prosecutor weep with joy. But I wasn't planning to start with the evidence. I was going to let her hang herself. Uncle Richard arrived at our house at precisely 10 o'clock, stepping out of a Tesla Model S that probably cost more than my father made in 2 years. He was a silver-haired man in his 50s, impeccably dressed but radiating warmth and energy. When he embraced me on the front porch, I felt the genuine affection that had been building between us over our weeks of correspondence. "Sophia, it's so wonderful to see you in person." He turned to my parents, and I watched my father's face cycle through surprise, suspicion, and grudging respect as he took in his brother's obvious success. "Miguel, it's been too long." My mother had clearly spent hours preparing for this meeting, wearing her best dress and a smile so forced it looked painful. "Richard, we're so honored to have you in our home. We've heard so much about your accomplishments." Emma appeared at the perfect moment, practically gliding down the stairs in a carefully chosen outfit that screamed Harvard-bound prodigy. She'd spent 2 hours on her hair and makeup, and the effect was undeniably impressive. I watched Uncle Richard's face carefully as my parents proudly introduced their star daughter. "Emma's been accepted to Harvard," my father announced with barely contained pride. "Full scholarship to their pre-law program. We couldn't be more proud." "Harvard! Uncle Richard's eyebrows rose appropriately. That's incredibly impressive. You must be extraordinarily talented. Emma practically glowed. I've worked really hard for it. I've always known I wanted to study law, and Harvard has been my dream since I was little. She shot me a quick glance, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of her deception. Sophia's always been more of the practical type, you know, focused on realistic goals. I bit my tongue and nodded sadly. Emma's always been the brilliant one in the family. I'm just hoping to maybe do well at community college. Uncle Richard frowned slightly. Community college? But Sophia, your research project was remarkable. Surely you're applying to four-year universities? My parents exchanged glances. My mother laughed nervously. Oh, Richard, Sophia's always been a bit scattered academically. She has some good ideas, but she lacks Emma's focus and discipline. We think community college will be a better fit for her learning style. Plus, we can only afford to send one daughter to a prestigious university, my father added bluntly. It makes sense to invest in the child with the most potential. I watched Uncle Richard's expression grow cooler. In our previous conversations, I'd painted a picture of a family that simply couldn't afford multiple college educations, not one that actively chose to invest in only one daughter. This casual dismissal of my potential was clearly bothering him. Well, he said carefully, I'd be very interested in hearing more about both girls' academic achievements. Sophia, why don't you tell me about your current projects? This was my moment. I'd prepared a presentation that would demonstrate my real capabilities while staying completely within the bounds of what I could legitimately have accomplished at my age. I walked Uncle Richard through my research methodology, my preliminary findings, and my plans for future experimentation. I spoke passionately about biomedical engineering applications and how my work could potentially impact drug delivery for cancer patients. Uncle Richard was visibly impressed. Sophia, this is absolutely fascinating. Have you submitted this work to any science competitions, research programs? I looked down at my hands. I've tried applying to a few programs, but I never seem to hear back. I guess my work isn't as good as I thought. That seems very unlikely, Uncle Richard said sharply. This work is exceptional for someone your age. Emma, what's your area of academic focus? Emma launched into a prepared speech about her interest in corporate law and social justice, hitting all the right notes about Harvard's prestigious program and her plans for the future. She was articulate and polished, but I could see Uncle Richard noting the contrast between her generic talking points and my specific, passionate research discussion. And what kind of grades do you girls maintain? Uncle Richard asked. Emma's our valedictorian, my mother said quickly. 4.0 GPA, president of 3 clubs, volunteer work with the homeless shelter. She's always been extraordinarily driven. And Sophia? Another pause. Sophia does her best, my father said diplomatically. She's adequate academically. I felt Uncle Richard's attention sharpen. What exactly does adequate mean? Oh, Emma jumped in helpfully. Sophia's more of a B student. She tries hard, but academics don't come naturally to her like they do for me. She's better with hands-on stuff. Uncle Richard turned to me. Sophia, what's your current GPA? I pretended to hesitate as if embarrassed. I have a 4.02, actually. But Emma's right that school doesn't come as naturally to me. I have to work really hard for my grades. The room went quiet. My parents looked uncomfortable, clearly not expecting this topic to come up. Emma's smile faltered slightly. Both daughters with perfect GPAs, Uncle Richard mused. That's quite remarkable. And Sophia, what did you score on your SATs? Another moment of family discomfort. I scored 1580, I said quietly. Uncle Richard's eyebrows shot up. 1580? That's in the 99th percentile. Emma, what were your scores? Emma's cheeks flushed. I scored 1520, which is still really good. Just shows that test scores aren't everything, I mean, Harvard obviously looked at the whole package when they accepted me. I watched Uncle Richard processing this information. 2 daughters with nearly identical academic credentials, but one was dismissed as adequate, while the other was celebrated as a prodigy. One was deemed worthy of investment, while the other was directed toward community college. The favoritism was so blatant, it was impossible to ignore. I'm curious, Uncle Richard said slowly, about the timeline of Emma's Harvard acceptance. When did you receive your notification? Just a few weeks ago, Emma said brightly. I was so excited. The letter came right to our mailbox, and I just screamed when I saw it. And Sophia, when did you receive your rejection letters from universities? I bit my lip. Around the same time, actually. It was kind of hard watching Emma get her acceptance while I got rejections. But I'm happy for her. She deserves it. Uncle Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that meant trouble for someone. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, he said. I have to say, I'm impressed with both girls. Emma, your Harvard acceptance is quite an achievement. And Sophia, your research work is truly exceptional. In fact, I have a proposition. My heart began to pound. Sophia, I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to Stanford, plus a guaranteed research position in my biotech company's summer internship program. The work you've shown me today demonstrates exactly the kind of innovative thinking we value. The room exploded. My parents looked stunned. Emma went pale. But, Uncle Richard continued calmly, I do have some concerns about the family dynamics I've observed here today. Sophia, I think you might benefit from an environment where your talents are properly recognized and nurtured. The scholarship includes a living stipend that would allow you to be financially independent. Richard, my father sputtered, that's incredibly generous, but I'm not finished, Uncle Richard said firmly. I've been impressed by both girls today, but I've also been troubled by some inconsistencies in what I've been told versus what I've observed. Sophia, I'd like you to think carefully about my offer. And Emma, I'd love to hear more about your Harvard acceptance. Perhaps you could show me the documentation? Emma's face went white. The documentation? Your acceptance letter, scholarship notification, that sort of thing. I'm very familiar with Harvard's programs, and I'd love to see exactly what they offered you. I watched Emma's world begin to crumble. She couldn't produce the Harvard documents because they were mine, sitting in her room in a folder marked insurance. But she couldn't admit that without revealing her entire scheme. I don't have them with me right now, she stammered. They're upstairs, in my room, but this isn't really the time. Oh, I don't mind waiting, Uncle Richard said pleasantly. Why don't you go get them? I'd love to take a look. Emma shot desperate glances at our parents, but they were clearly expecting her to produce the documents. After all, why wouldn't she have them readily available? Actually, I said quietly, Uncle Richard, I think there might be some confusion about the Harvard situation. Every eye in the room turned to me. Emma looked terrified. I need to show you something, I continued, pulling out my phone. I've been trying to figure out why I never heard back from Harvard when my scores and credentials seemed strong enough. So, I contacted their admissions office directly. I opened my email and began reading. Dear Sophia Martinez, thank you for your inquiry regarding your scholarship notification. According to our records, you were awarded the Harvard Achievement Scholarship on February 15th, and we sent notification to your home address. We also sent follow-up letters on February 28th and March 7th when we didn't receive your acceptance. We're concerned about your lack of response and would like to confirm that you received our communications. The silence in the room was deafening. Emma's face had gone from pale to gray. My parents looked confused and alarmed. Uncle Richard's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the sharp intelligence in his eyes as he put the pieces together. Sophia, my mother said slowly, what are you saying? I turned to Emma, my expression perfectly innocent. Emma, did you maybe see any letters from Harvard when you were collecting the mail? Maybe they got mixed up with your acceptance somehow? Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. She was trapped and she knew it. There must be some mistake, she finally managed. Here's the thing, I continued gently. Harvard sent me a complete record of their communication attempts. 3 letters to our home address, starting in February. And Emma, your Harvard acceptance letter. When exactly did you say you received it? I told you a few weeks ago. That's interesting because Harvard says they sent my scholarship notification on February 15th. And you said you received your acceptance a few weeks ago, which would put it right around that same time. Uncle Richard leaned forward. Sophia, are you suggesting that there might have been some confusion with the mail? I pulled out a manila folder I'd been hiding under my chair. Not confusion exactly. Emma, remember when you said you'd been helping Mom organize the mail? I've been doing some organizing of my own. I opened the folder and began laying out papers on the coffee table. Printed emails, screenshots, transaction records. This is a keylogger report showing Emma accessing my College Board account and changing my reported SAT scores. This is a screenshot of her email drafts folder where she saved copies of emails she sent impersonating our mother to withdraw my applications from summer programs. And this, I placed a printed email on top of the pile, is her email to Harvard admissions, sent from a spoofed account that looked like mine, declining the scholarship offer. Emma bolted upright. Sophia, how did you? I've been documenting everything for weeks, I said calmly. Emma, you kept very thorough records, too thorough. I turned to Uncle Richard. Emma has been systematically sabotaging my academic opportunities for years. She intercepts my mail, hacks my accounts, and forges my correspondence. The Harvard scholarship was mine. She stole it. My parents looked stunned. My father's face was cycling through disbelief, anger, and dawning horror as he realized the implications. But Emma, my mother whispered, how could you? Why would you? Emma was shaking. You don't understand. Sophia always gets praised for being so smart, so special. But I work harder. I deserve those opportunities more. I've been protecting our family's resources by making sure they go to the daughter who would actually use them properly. Protecting our family's resources? Uncle Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. By committing fraud? It's not fraud, Emma snapped. It's just strategic resource allocation. Sophia would have wasted those opportunities anyway. She's not driven like I am. She doesn't want success as much as I do. Emma, my father's voice was hollow. Did you really steal Sophia's scholarship? Emma's composure finally cracked completely. I earned that scholarship. I'm the one who's been planning for Harvard since middle school. I'm the one who's been working toward this goal. Sophia just stumbles into these opportunities without even trying, and everyone acts like she's some kind of genius. But I'm the one with real ambition. I'm the one who deserves to succeed. The words poured out of her in a torrent of entitlement and rage. Years of jealousy and resentment spilled across the living room as she justified her crimes with increasingly desperate logic. She'd convinced herself that she was the victim, that my natural academic ability was somehow unfair to her superior work ethic. Uncle Richard listened to her meltdown with growing disgust. When she finally ran out of steam, he turned to my parents. Did you know about this? My father looked stricken. No, of course not. We would never. But you did notice that Sophia's opportunities kept disappearing while Emma's kept materializing. You noticed that one daughter consistently failed to receive correspondence, while the other consistently succeeded. And your response was to conclude that Sophia was simply inferior. My mother began crying. We thought Emma always seemed more focused, more ambitious. Sophia never seemed to care as much about school. Because every time Sophia showed ambition, Emma crushed it, Uncle Richard said bluntly. Every time Sophia reached for an opportunity, it mysteriously disappeared. And instead of investigating these coincidences, you decided that Sophia was just less capable. He turned to me, his expression gentle. Sophia, I'm deeply sorry this happened to you. And I'm even more sorry that your family enabled it. Uncle Richard, I said quietly, there's something else you should know. I pulled out one final document. This is a complete financial analysis of Emma's stolen opportunities. The summer programs, the scholarships, the research positions. I calculated the total value of everything she took from me over the past 3 years. I handed him the paper. She didn't just steal my Harvard scholarship. She stole approximately $847,000 worth of opportunities, financial aid, and career advancement. And that's not counting the long-term earning potential of the connections and experiences I lost. Uncle Richard stared at the number. $800,000. But here's the really interesting part, I continued. Emma's been so focused on stealing my opportunities that she never developed any legitimate credentials of her own. Her entire academic profile is built on fraud, which means I turned to Emma with a smile that probably looked as cold as I felt. Emma, when Harvard finds out about this, and they will find out because I'm sending them a complete copy of this evidence, they're going to rescind your acceptance immediately. They'll also blacklist you from ever reapplying. And since you've been lying about your credentials to other schools too, you're probably going to find yourself with zero college options. Emma went dead white. You can't, you wouldn't. Oh, but I would, and I have. I pulled out my phone and showed her a sent email. I already contacted Harvard admissions this morning, and MIT, and Yale, and every other school you applied to. Funny thing about academic fraud, universities take it very seriously. Sophia, my father said desperately, surely we can work this out within the family. Emma made a mistake, but... A mistake? Uncle Richard's voice could have cut glass. Miguel, your daughter committed identity theft, mail fraud, computer crimes, and academic fraud. This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern of deliberate criminal behavior. He stood up, his decision clearly made. Sophia, my offer stands. Full scholarship to Stanford, plus the internship, plus financial independence. I think it's time you got away from this toxic environment. But what about Emma? My mother pleaded. She's still our daughter. She still needs an education. Uncle Richard looked at Emma with undisguised contempt. Emma will be lucky if she doesn't face criminal charges. As for her education, perhaps she can start at community college, assuming any institution will accept her once word gets out about her fraud. Emma finally seemed to grasp the full scope of her situation. Wait, no, you can't do this to me. I worked so hard. I deserve those opportunities. You worked hard to destroy your sister, Uncle Richard said coldly, and now you get to live with the consequences. He turned to my parents. Miguel, Carmen, I'm deeply disappointed in both of you. Your favoritism enabled Emma's crimes and nearly destroyed Sophia's future. I'll be having no further contact with this family, with one exception. He looked at me warmly. Sophia, you're welcome to visit me anytime. In fact, I insist on it. You deserve to have family members who recognize your worth. As Uncle Richard prepared to leave, I felt the last piece of my revenge clicking into place. I turned to my parents, who were sitting in stunned silence as their golden child sobbed on the couch. Mom, Dad, I want you to know that I forgive you, I said gently. I understand that Emma was very convincing, and it's natural to want to support the child who seems more successful. But I do think you should understand the full consequences of your choices. I sat down across from them. Emma's college fund, the $180,000 you've been saving for her education. You're going to need every penny of that for legal fees when Harvard and the other universities file fraud charges. And since Emma will now be starting at community college instead of Harvard Law, you'll be supporting her financially for much longer than you planned. My mother's face went pale. Legal fees? Oh, yes. Academic fraud is a federal crime when it involves scholarships and financial aid. Emma could be looking at serious jail time. And since some of the computer crimes were committed from your home internet connection, the FBI might want to interview you too. I paused to let that sink in. Meanwhile, I'll be financially independent thanks to Uncle Richard's scholarship and stipend. I won't need any support from you at all, which is good, because you're going to need all your resources for Emma's legal troubles. My father looked stunned. Sophia, surely you're not going to let this go that far. Emma's your sister. Emma stopped being my sister the moment she decided to destroy my future for her own gain, I said calmly. And you stopped being real parents the moment you decided one daughter was worth investing in while the other wasn't. I stood up and walked toward the door where Uncle Richard was waiting. Oh, and one more thing, I said, turning back. That college fund you saved for Emma? You might want to check the account balance. Emma's been skimming money from it for months to fund her academic success. Designer clothes for interviews, expensive test prep courses, application fees for programs she was never qualified for. I'd estimate she's stolen about $30,000 so far. Emma's sobbing intensified. My parents looked at her with growing horror as they realized the full scope of her betrayal. The account statements are all in her email, I added helpfully. Password is Harvard bound 2025. Ironic, isn't it? I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in 2 lifetimes. Behind me, I could hear Emma's desperate pleas, my mother's shocked questions, my father's angry demands for explanations. The Golden family was crumbling, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being crushed under the debris. Uncle Richard was waiting by his car, shaking his head. Sophia, I am so sorry you had to endure that family for 16 years. It's okay, I said honestly. It taught me exactly who I can trust and who I can't, and it made me stronger. Well, you won't have to endure it much longer. Stanford's spring semester starts in 2 weeks if you want to begin early. And I meant what I said about financial independence. Between the scholarship, the stipend, and the internship salary, you'll never have to depend on them again. As we drove away from my childhood home, I felt the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. Emma would face the consequences of her crimes. My parents would finally understand the true cost of their favoritism. And I would have the future I'd always deserved. But this was just the beginning of my revenge. 6 months later, I was sitting in my Stanford dorm room, video chatting with Uncle Richard about my research internship, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sophia, this is Mom. Emma's trial starts next week. The lawyers say she might get 2 years in federal prison. Please, she's learned her lesson. Can't you drop the charges? I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the scared, broken girl who had begged me not to ruin her life when the FBI agents had shown up at our house with a warrant for her computer. In my previous life, I might have felt guilty. I might have second-guessed myself, wondered if I was being too harsh. But in this life, I knew exactly what Emma was capable of. I knew that her lesson learned was just another manipulation, another attempt to escape consequences. I knew that if I showed mercy, she would interpret it as weakness and start planning her next sabotage campaign. I deleted the message without responding. 3 weeks later, I got another text. Sophia, Emma got 18 months in federal prison plus 3 years probation. Your father had a heart attack from the stress. He's in the hospital. Don't you care about your family at all? I did care about my family. That's why I was protecting myself from them. I deleted that message too. Stanford was everything I had dreamed it would be.